Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Wednesday the 16th of November, and you are watching episode 68 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap, providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, dams, some are more equal than others, is my guest, Leila Vurban. Leila is the spokesman for the No Pumped Hydro, Save Netherdale, Ugella and Mount Dalrymple community groups, which have formed to address the local issues arising from the Brisbane government's plan to build a major pumped hydro facility some 75 kilometres west of Mackay. Currently known as the Pioneer Burdekin Pumped Hydro Project, it involves the building of two major upper dams and a significant lower holding reservoir that will result in the inundation of a large area of the local scenic and productive landscape. Welcome, Leila.
Hello, how you doing?
Good, thank you. Now, it's quite surprising, this project, how fast it's moved on people. I mean, usually in Queensland, especially northern Queensland, we're the ones jumping up and down, wanting a project, a dam or some piece of infrastructure, and we'll carry on for years and years and years, and nothing happens. This is the complete reverse. This is Brisbane going gung-ho and finding an amazing approximately $12 billion of money to create this new project. And really, it's also, they've only established the hydro department or group within the government just over a year ago, and they're this far advanced already. Does that not shock you and your community?
Very much so, but it's a little bit more secretive than that. They did desktop studies with the ANU for 12 months beforehand, but the Queensland Hydro was actually only registered the month before that they made the announcement.
Well, this is, like I say, this is completely abnormal in regards to what we experience normally in northern Queensland. I mean, the Burdekin stage 2 dam, increase in the wall height, was part of the original plan when it was first built back in '86, and a lot of people have been asking for it and sort of pushing the idea for 30 odd years and get nowhere. Here in Cairns, we're faced with the access road up to the Tablelands, the Coranda Range Road, and for years we've been complaining in that about it's a choked artery and it's strangling the economic growth of the region. But then comes the new energy wave with renewables, and suddenly we now can move mountains.
Yes. I think it's very much a political stunt, obviously wanting votes from down in the southeast corner. We all know that we need this green energy future. However, a large population believe that we're rushing into this. We're not investigating other options, cleaner energy in other areas. I'm by no means going to say I'm an expert in any of that area. I do, however, think that they are rushing this pumped hydro idea, which is actually an old technology. They could be investigating and putting that sort of $12 billion into something that's more sustainable and more reliable, has perhaps storing energy without using energy. So this project, as many people do know, uses more energy than it generates.
I suppose one of the things we'd probably like to know about is a bit of the history of the location and the use of the Pioneer River up in that section, its general annual flows, and what's the general experience of an interaction between the locals and the river system
So the Youngalla National Park and the surroundings, so that's Crediton, Mount Dalrymple and Netherdale, the history is quite rich. They used to have a train that ran all the way to Netherdale. There was a logging industry in the very beginning when the settlers first came, as well as the sugarcane. There was a mill in Netherdale itself, as well as Finchhatton. So a lot of the land that's cleared that they call grazier land now, it came about because of the logging industry. But Youngalla is also unique because it's an island of rainforest, so it's surrounded by arid bushland. And this creates an environment for endemic species that can't be replicated anywhere else. So it's really unique, and the locals here cherish that, and we also take care of that and protect it. The water system, so it runs down the Burdekin, but it also runs down through the Cattle Creek. So they're the two water systems they want to block. We have cyclone seasons. We have huge rainfall, sometimes 7 meters or more in a week's worth of rain, and we do get flooding. We have had landslides. That water system runs from Cattle Creek all the way down to the reef catchment. It helps give water towards drinking, farming, and also maintains ecosystems along the way.
What about permanent lakes? What areas there with permanent water lakes that can be used for recreation and also supports the local wildlife?
So we've already got the Youngalla Dam. There's also Timbra Dam. These are dams that have allocated water usage to farming, as well as obviously drinking water. These sort of dams can also be upgraded for hydro. So they've already gone through the process of, that land resumption and building these dams. The water, I think it's Timbra Dam, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but only 30% of the water is actually used by farmers. So there's a huge amount not being used at all right now.
Are those existing dams further upstream or downstream of the proposed hydro scheme?
So Youngalla Dam's sort of on the opposite side of the back of Youngalla Crediton area. However, when you look at transmission lines linking up with other projects they're further along with, for instance, the Bowen Utilities Group, who are doing the wind and solar behind Youngalla Dam. When you look at the transmission lines running from this proposed dam, they'll have to run over the mountain and out the back, linking up with all of those sorts of projects. So you're looking at a much bigger impact than just an underground pumped hydro dam. Potentially put at a different site, you're closer to these other transmission lines than where this proposed dam will be.
Well, transmission lines, I mean, land clearing and safety distance for fires against the towers and that is fairly substantial anyway.
Yep.
So that would take a fair bit of removal of native vegetation to facilitate the installation of those power lines. That would be another big impact on
and this proposed pumped hydro dam is supposed to be the biggest in the southern hemisphere. So the transmission lines, the largest ones you can get, pretty much I've been told, you'll need, I think, 10 lots of the 6 that's hold, 10 lots of those running to be able to run that amount of power. So we're not even looking at just, a couple of power lines. It's quite an infrastructure to run. And, when you look at the drilling, they talk about it being a shorter distance to the snowy hydro 2.0, whatever they're calling it. I think ours is supposed to be 5 kilometers, but you know, if you're drilling into granite in a mountain for 3 or 4 years straight to create enough for potentially 18 turbines underneath for water to flow up and down, as well as access to those pipes, so enough for cars and vehicles to go in, that's quite a substantial project that will have an impact on the surrounding national park. So vibration, noise, dust, you know, where does all of that rock go? What's the size of the trucks and the equipment that need to come in and do those sorts of drilling? So yes, it's the bigger picture. It's looking at all of it. At every stage has a huge impact. And, you know, as I stated earlier, Yungala National Park is really unique and needs to be preserved.
It's quite interesting now. I mean, I just picked up a bit on your language talking about we need green energy and renewable energy and things like that. And we've had the same situation up here in Cairns. We've had groups of people talking about the need for renewables and a green future and all that sort of thing. But now it's only starting to dawn on people what exactly it means with the implementation of this. We've just had the initial focus up here was there was a experimental basically wind farm. I think it was called Windy Hill. I think it's going to be due to be dismantled fairly soon. But the first major installation was Emerald Hill wind farm, and we had, of course, the environmentalist lobby and the Greens and that cheering it on, sort of thing, and saying, "Well, this is wonderful," and that, and you know, applauded as the new towers and blades and that got unloaded at Cairns and went up to Mount Emerald. But then a couple of years later, we're now installing new additional turbines at Caban. You know, it's only 28 turbines, but they're much bigger than the original ones. And people are sort of thinking, well, we didn't really expect this, you know, sort of to continue. Then all of a sudden, now there's a third project just out of Cairns near Ravenside, the Chilumban wind farm, which is 95 turbines. And that required, a lot of that area was sort of saved by the environmental groups against logging, right? They basically completely decimated the timber industry in North Queensland, you know, as part of this thing to protect the environment. Yet when it came to the wind farm, the tick to allow it to go through it's fairly quick. And yes, I think it's caught a lot of the environmentalists. There's a difference between people who are the Greens and the environmentalists. I think they're two different things. Environmentalists actually worries about the real environment. The Greens have got an ideology and used to have a connection with the environment. But now it's starting to dawn on your community what the impact of renewables actually is. And I think it's going to roll all the way down the whole transmission line from Cairns down to Bundaberg, sort of, and even further down to Gympie, exactly what the impacts are going to be with the new
potentially people aren't going to know until it's too late. Palaszczuk has proposed that Queensland is the energy state, and it looks okay on paper, but the reality of linking up all of these projects with transmission lines means that lots and lots and lots of people's properties are going to have transmission lines running over top of them, which brings up health issues, as well as wind farms going up on nice, beautiful forest hills, which requires mass clearing around, so safe zones around these wind turbines, not to mention the roads to have access to them. And then there's also the concern for recycling of these products, these blades. Where are they going? Solar panels, where are they going? Yes, their lifespan on paper is 20 or 30 years, but then you take into consideration storm damage or errors happening, breaks happening in the technology, unforeseen. Where do the solar panels go? And people that are living out in these areas that are the first point of direct connection with these projects starting, often we've moved out here to disconnect from the system. So we are more self-sufficient. You know, some of us might be farming, but a lot of us don't have internet. You know, I, for one, have my own solar system. I'm not on the grid. I've invested in having a small footprint for the environment, and I left the city to do that. And now I'm looking at being relocated to drop the city, or, you know, the greater population's electricity bills down by $150 a year. So whilst they're saying it's going to bring it down by $150 a year, everybody's electricity prices are going up.
Well, the other thing is, I don't think anyone's really got an idea of actually the scale of renewables you actually need to install to replace baseload power. And I think I think people could get a bit of an idea if they go to the government website and just look at the generation projects and that. And I think there's, from memory, there's about 133 solar projects on the books. That's both currently installed and planned. And wind farms, I think there's a total of about 113 installed and planned facilities to go in. And until it arrives on your doorstep, you know, it doesn't worry you, sort of thing. And the other thing that's going to happen is, for the people in Brisbane and southeast Queensland, it's never going to worry them because it's never going to be in their backyard.
Well, the issue is, though, you know, as people have been saying for a very, very, very long time, we need to plant more trees. You know, I hear a lot about climate change, global warming. What do we know brings global warming down? Planting trees, oxygen, clean air. A lot of these projects require clearing large areas of natural forest. It's not, you know, they're selling this project as predominantly agriculture land, farming land. You know, yes, there is a portion of the land which is farming land, but then you're looking at, for instance, my property, which is land for wildlife, replanting from farming of old. Then right next to, on the boundary of these properties, a national park. Native species don't know the difference between your national park and somebody's land. They move along both, and they've been doing that for a very long time. So you go and plonk a non-recreational dam smack bang in the middle of it in platypus territory. Where do the platypus go? Where do the birds go? You know, we don't have the ability to change the landscape and expect that our habitats can just adapt. There will be an effect. And at this time, they're currently bringing out threatened species action plans and protecting certain areas of Australia. We happen to have at least half a dozen of those protected species that actually live in our national park, that are right on the borders of this power plant or battery, the Queensland battery for the whole of Australia, hey? It's pretty emotional for a lot of us. The hard part is, you know, wanting more time to explore other options. This is being fast-tracked. There's a, you know, coordination is something that can be brought in, where they start getting local, state and federal working as one. And that's what they're pushing for with this project. They want coordination so that certain parts of this project can move faster than what a normal process would be for a dam going into a new area. You know, we're promised that the studies will still be done the same, but they released it one day, and the next day people showed up to talk to landowners. They didn't consult the traditional landowners prior to this announcement, and they haven't been transparent with information up until this point. So if they're coordinating with local, state and federal to fast track this sort of project, how are we supposed to trust that they're actually following their own rules on this sort of process and making sure that our future is actually still safe? You know, what happens if it doesn't work out? Do we go without energy through our summers, extreme heat waves, or down in Victoria, extreme colds? You know, there's big issues here.
Yeah, the other thing is too, is when we talk about, I love government, the idea of government consultation, and I can see where you're coming from, that this project has come into effect fairly quickly, and you probably feel that it's going to be ramrodded through. But the thing is, we've seen other legislation and other projects over the years where they go through lengthy consultations and a lot of town hall meetings. If you go, I don't know if you remember the amendments to the Vegetation Management Act way back in about 2017, 2016. There was a lot of consultation right through. They went out all the way through sort of the Mount Isa, Longreach. It would have been 20 or 30 townships visited in that, and it went over a few years. So they have that consultation, but the thing is, they don't listen anyway. That by the time they come up with the idea and formulate it in Brisbane, it's basically a fait accompli, and they go through the process. So even if you had 2 years, to sort of talk to them and get information, do you think the outcome would be any different?
I think a united front, it definitely has an impact. Power in numbers, and I don't mean about being angry and just protesting, but we are starting up a information campaign, so to try and help not just the local region, but all over Australia, if we can, understand the full impact of these projects that they're proposing. You know, we aren't going out there and saying, no, this is the wrong way. What we're trying to do is go, these are the facts, make your own decision. But if you're not in support of it, let's present a united front. Let's involve the community, bring the community together, because what they're trying to do at the moment is divide and conquer. Even their information sessions, they want to have one-on-ones with people, and they say it as though that way everyone has the chance to ask their own individual questions. But we're talking about people that don't have internet, people who don't watch the news necessarily, who don't know anything about these sort of technologies. And then they want to give them the chance to come in and ask questions. I mean, the only question people want to know is, when are you kicking me off my property? Do you have the right to kick me off the property? How long have I got? Where am I going to go? How can you replicate a property that's been in family for generations? Or what about the elderly who planned on selling in the next few years? Are they going to get what they would have got for their property if for the property value that it would be in 5 years' time? What about farmers that were building their businesses and now that's come to a standstill? They can't expand and they can't fend for their families. Like, huge impact that's happened on a proposal with no prior consultation. But a calm, united front is important, because we aren't dimwits. We're people who actually know and care about what we in the environment that we're living in and the community that we've been living in. So that's what we want to bring forward time and time again, just a united front.
So the three communities, Mount Dalrymple, Yajala and Netherloo, how far apart are they, and how easy is it for people in that area to, and is there places where they can regularly meet or have meetings?
Yes, we've got a Youngala community hub which is open for community meetings. It also has a men's shed and monthly markets there. Youngala is very much the central place, Crediton in one direction and Mount Dalrymple in the other direction, and Netherdale's at the base. So often we will meet in that central area. This proposal, they neglect to mention Youngula. You know, it gives them a bad rap, because internationally known Youngula National Park, people travel from all over the world to come here. If they put that as their destination for the proposed dam, no one's going to agree with it. But Netherdale, half of Mackay don't even know where Netherdale is. It used to be on the map in bolder letters than Finch Hatton, because it was the end line for the train line. That used to be the only transportation between Youngula and Mackay before vehicles were brought to the area. So historically, Netherdale is actually a very important place. However, now it's sort of disappearing and they want to wipe it from the map.
In regards to local representatives, I think Steve Andrew would be your local state member.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously you're not too far away from Mackay, so there's other state seats fairly close. Your federal seat was probably was it Flynn for you or Capricornia?
Capricornia.
Yeah. So from those local representatives, what sort of assistance, feedback, or that are you getting from them?
We've had lots of visits from the opposing parties. Lots of LNP have come to the area. We had the Shadow Minister for Water visit. We had Michelle Landry. We had Matt Canavan. We've taken snippets of support from each of them. However, we are pushing for this to not be a political fight. For us, it's not about giving people votes. It's about informing the population, and they can do what they will with it, but getting it out there about the bigger impact. Stephen Andrews is hugely supportive. He's gotten us into contact with a lot of really useful people that can help us with our campaign. But this needs to be bigger. So at the moment, we've got a petition, a parliament petition that's got almost 5,000 signatures on it, but it's only at state level. We want to get it to 10,000 signatures or more so that we can then take this to a federal level, because we believe that this should be a decision that's made by the whole of Australia, not just the state of Queensland. It impacts all of us. You know, Youngula is the longest strip of subtropical rainforest in the southern hemisphere, pristine rainforests and areas. We had huge impact come from the fires, not just a few years ago. So the rainforest is still recovering from that and will take a really long time. Adding a project like this on top of that sort of devastation, it might become irreversible. And I don't believe personally that we can afford to keep doing that to our natural habitats before we're having to somehow generate our own clean oxygen.
Oh, I hate to disappoint everyone, but 80% of oxygen actually comes from the sea through algae, not trees.
Well, that's true. Yes, yeah. But then they also put in
there's a lot of myths and things about trees. But one thing trees do, they sequester carbon dioxide. Are the most efficient sequesters of carbon dioxide. But the thing is, the trick is, you have to actually harvest the timber and store it away for a long period of time. I mean, if you go to Europe, you can go into cathedrals, buildings and that, and you can be in a building that's, you know, the roof and the whole roof structure is supported by beams that have been there for 700 years. So timber can sequester carbon for that sort of period. So that's the other trick we've got to have too.
You look at food chains and ecosystems. Doug Cannon, who is a resident where they proposed to put Reservoir B, he's a beekeeper. And we all know about bees and the essential role they play in all living life, all living creatures on Earth. So I don't think misplacing families that are beekeepers are very good for the environment either.
Just one of the things too, like you say, you need more support. Is there a bit of a focus to at least get the people of Mackay, because Mackay is a very substantial city in itself and the surrounding area. And also there's a lot of, it's a mixed bag. It's, that supports the mining industry with engineering facilities and things like that. You also got a lot of agriculture. So is there a focus to trying to make that connection with Mackay and get the message out there and use them as the first growing base for supporters to your situation?
Yeah, unfortunately, being that it was released in the lead up to Christmas, it's a very busy time for everyone, but we are working on beginning our, I guess you call them rallies, but I'd like to think of them as information days, where we can connect with the Mackay populace and get the message out there, because even there's a lot of people that don't even know what's happening. So come end of January, early February, we hope to kick off the beginning of our rallies, so to speak, and get that message out there. We also want to work on doing workshops with children in the local region, make this about information on habitats and endemic species and what's at risk here. One of the biggest things is we all feel very divided. Our stability has been taken from us. So as a group, we actually want to bring people together to offer that support. Mackay is going to be our first step, and we will work towards getting out there further to Rockhampton, Bowen, Brisbane, and it'll go on for the length of this project. We'll be working on getting the alternate information out there, so the opposing information to what Queensland Hydro is giving the population.
I think it's important now. I mean, if you could show us some of the photos you've got of the surrounding area, and people can get a bit of an appreciation of the size and scale of the project and what is going to be potentially lost.
Yep. So I'll share my screen.
And you can just talk us through,
yep.
through the photos.
As it comes up.
It's coming up.
Yep. We'll come into, this is a view from Pease's Lookout, which is on the road towards Mount Dalrymple. You'll see halfway along, there's a ridge to the left-hand side that comes down, and this is about the line in which they propose to put the dam wall. A lot of Netherdale's cut off in this photo, so I'll flick across, and you'll see here that this shows more of the Netherdale area and where that wall might go. So this is a non-recreational dam.
Is this the wall up here, up on this left-hand side, is it?
Yeah, so the darker bit is a rough, obvious, very rough drawing of where the wall would be. We have guesstimated from images they've given us that the wall would be roughly 800 metres in length. At its widest point, it may be around 200 metres, and it's about 60 metres high. So
that is one substantial dam.
Yeah. And so that whole area will have nothing living in it. They have to remove every tree and every plant and create an environment in which the water can be sucked up through the pipes and then dropped back down through the turbines. So all rocks, all things need to be removed, which leaves you
so this would be one of the upper dams, or is this
no?
This
is Netherdale. So this is the lower dam.
This is the reservoir. This is a reservoir holding dam.
Yeah. So this will be at the beginning of the Pioneer Valley. So this water system, this dam, would be ostensibly holding back water that would go down towards Mackay. So obviously one of our concerns, as we've been having excessive rain in Australia over this last week, and dams have been released and there's been epic flooding. Our question would be, this dam doesn't have a release point. In their proposal plan, it has a runoff. In cyclone seasons or excessive rainfall, in those, once in 100-year events, 3 of which we've had in the last 3 years, where does the water go? How does it flow out? What would the impact be? You know, the flooding potentially could come right from the top of the valley all the way down to Mackay, and the damage would be catastrophic. So
the other thing that people need to realise that in this lower reservoir, it actually, when the hydro's on, the water flows down into it and fills it up, and then when they want to pump it back, it's actually just about pumped dry. So it's basically just a big mud spot when they actually take the water back up to the higher dams.
Yes, and so when people come to visit Yangala National Park and they sit in the beer garden at the chalet looking over, this is what they'll be looking at.
So sometimes it would be full and sometimes it would be...
Yep, and the colour of the water can't be determined, but you can imagine with no life in it, it's not exactly going to be pristine aqua blue. It'll potentially be muddy, brown, sooty water.
Well, the other thing is it would be constantly with flows pouring into it and then pumped out of it. It would be a continual situation where there would be a lot of silt running around anyway when the water, when the hydro's on and pumping and letting water flow into it.
Exactly, yes. So moving along, photos, some of the photos that have been sent in to me of the type of rainforest that will be at risk. This is Mount Dalrymple. These are the grazier lands at Mount Dalrymple. So the photo on their flyer, the front page, is a dry, arid area that we don't even believe is Yangala or Mount Dalrymple or anywhere near. In fact, some people think it's actually over near Nebo. And there's people's lakes on their own properties that they maintain. So these are areas for endemic species. You know, we also have the platypus living in these areas. They've just come out with research about the platypus that show their genetics is different between the top of a dam wall and the other side of a dam wall. So dams hinder the movement in mating season for platypus. Their gene pool gets smaller, and over time their numbers decrease. So that's another concern that we have. This is one of the maps that they've given us that show, so you'll actually see these little lines. This is the water catchments that come down. So you'll see for Netherdale, which I'm showing here, this is roughly 20% of the water that feeds the Pioneer Valley water catchment. And then up top here, you have the reservoir A and B. So this road, the dark line that follows here, they're actually moving the road. They want to move the road that drives up to Mount Dalrymple and have little dam walls that hold that water back along that road. So that road actually hugs National Park. And over here, you'll see a larger dam wall, that purple area, and all these little purple bits are holding back the water. So in the last 5 years, we've had landslides at Mount Dalrymple. They can't maintain the roads up there in the rain and the cyclone seasons. And then we'll flick across to the next photo, which shows reservoir down the bottom, linking up to the reservoirs at the top here. So for confirmation, the other water bodies you see in these areas are just areas that they propose could be dams, but it's these two that we're looking at, which would be reservoir A and B, linked down to reservoir at the bottom, at the base there. So the road that goes through the middle of this dam, they actually need to relocate to the right-hand side that follows the ridge and then joins back up to this top here in the middle for Yangala. So that road that they propose to put in also hugs National Park.
Just as a matter of interest, that lower reservoir, it looks like it can hold a massive amount of water. It looks as though it could almost hold I mean, it might be a bit of an illusion, but it seems to be able to hold a good portion of what's in the upper storage areas.
I think the three reservoirs combined ends up being a seventh of proportion of the Sydney Harbour, I believe. Somewhere in my notes I have it written down. The volume of water for Netherdale is 70 gigalitres, and each reservoir at the top is 35 gigalitres. So that works out to be 70 gigalitres at the top and 70 at the bottom.
Well, it doesn't leave anything in the system really for anything else if it's just going down and back up, down and back up. Because if you let anything out, well, then you're really depending on the rainfall to come along and replenish. I mean, in North Queensland, it's a bit of a rush and dust. Like that's what I call rivers up on the Cape. Basically, there's a big rush for a couple of months of the year, but then it doesn't take them long to be just a dry riverbed. So you have a situation where there's zero water available to head back down to Mackay if you've got a situation where there's a lengthy dry spell.
And when we had the fires, that's exactly what we had. We didn't have rain for 6 months or more. Everything dried up, all the creeks and everything dried up. A lot of the dams depleted massively. What happens then? Are we going to be pumping the hydro if there's not enough water to be pumping it up and down? Where do they bring in the water in that sort of instance? Will they then need to be pumping water from Youngalla Dam? And what's the infrastructure for that sort of piping? There's lots and lots of unanswered questions.
I think in the conversation we had before we started, you're saying there's 18 turbines altogether in the downhill runs. Have they assigned an actual? I think I've seen somewhere that's 10 gigawatts altogether or something like that. The pumped hydro system.
Is it 5 gigawatts? I think. Is it? It's massive. It's bigger. So I think Snowy Hydro is 2, and this is 5. So it's a really big system. Storing that sort of energy. So the reason for the pumped hydro is they use wind and solar to generate the energy to pump it up during the day. And then at night time, when power usage is at a higher point, they want to drop all the water back down over a 12-hour period to generate that amount of energy to then feed back in. And again, the population believe that energy is sustaining the cities and the townships. But in a few of her statements at the beginning, Palaszczuk actually mentioned first giving that energy to the mining industries. So supporting the industries in the first instance that are already giving us power. And then eventually, we're working towards this green energy, what do you even call it, goal that, the world is aiming for. This is a huge transition, massive transition. It's sort of beyond words, really.
The other thing, when you talk about this, even if it's only 5 gigawatts of hydropower, which is substantial because I mean the whole peak demand for Queensland is only about 8 gigawatts anyway. So this is very substantial. But the other thing is the energy required to pump that water up that produces 5 gigawatts. You actually need 6 gigawatts of power. All right.
Yes.
Pump that up the hill. Now, if you're going to pump that up the hill on an ad hoc basis, when there's when you can get cheap wind power because it's oversupplied or that, and that's what basically Snowy 2 is. What it's depending on is they can get the surplus wind power when it's around for virtually free. Pump the water back up the hill. And then when the peak demand's in at around about 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night, and there's not enough wind power or renewables around, they can get a maximum return on their hydro. And I suppose this is the same thing. But does anyone have, I mean, here's a question. Do you or any of your group have any appreciation of what size wind farm you need to produce a gigawatt, let alone 5 gigawatts?
Well, wind farm, I couldn't say with wind farm, but when I was having a discussion with Stephen Andrews about it, proposed solar farms to contribute to this sort of power. Imagine driving for 3 hours straight and the only thing you see is acres and acres and acres of solar farms. We need lots and lots of those, as well as the wind farms and other sources of energy to go for this renewable. Renewable, yes, but is it sustainable? And is it really the best option? I mean, these are big questions. We as a group are trying, again, not to take on the big battle of what's the right option for the whole country. We're really trying to bring it back just to this dam, because this is the community that we are in and this is the community that we want to support. And, you know, we'll just do our bit in making sure that the right decisions are made for this region.
Well, just to give people a bit of an appreciation, to produce 1 gigawatt of equivalent baseload power, you have to build 9 Cooper's Gap wind farms. Now, Cooper Gap is currently the biggest wind farm we've got. I think it's got 123 turbines, nameplate capacity of 453 megawatts, and it covers 102 square kilometres. So you have to build 9 of those, and remember that Cooper's Gap cost $850 million just for one. So you've got to build 9 of those to get 1 gigawatt. Now, so to get 5 gigawatts, you've got to build 45 of those to pump the water back up the hill for your hydro dam that you're going to put in. Yeah. So if you can tell me where you can build 45 Cooper's Gap wind farms and not impact on the environment and people, please tell me. Yes. And these are the questions that people have got to start asking in regards to what is the scale that we're being asked to accept to deliver this green future. And that's only for our current needs. But we also have a group of people who think we can also build multiple more so we can export power in the form of hydrogen. So yeah. it goes on and on and on in regards to how much of our landscape is going to be covered by all these various projects. So Kansas just started to feel it in regards to Chilumban wind farm. You're starting to be impacted, and I'm sure it's going to go on and on. I think there will be a lot of groups like yours coming out and asking these questions in the very near future.
Coming out of the woodworks, there's lots of people, you don't hear about it. From us all the way down to Brisbane along the coast, there are communities that are under negotiation for different projects, whether it's wind, solar or other hydro dams, because don't forget, we aren't the only hydro dam. There's another one further south. It's big and we all want to rally together. The hardest part about this discussion, and I get this with politicians as well, that sort of spit at you saying that you're against this green energy future. And it's not like that at all. A lot of us actually out in these regions are very conscious of the environment and very conscious of our energy use and our footprint. It's just that we don't agree, really, is the bottom line. We don't agree that this is the right option for our state. And we would like the right questions to be asked in the right places. And we also want transparency with information. We want them to be held accountable, that they are jumping through the same fire hoops that everyone else has to be jumping through, and that they're bringing that information and their findings and the decisions that they make and putting it on the table for all of us to see on a regular basis. You know, we hear secondhand from other people that contracts are being signed with engineering for the studies to be done. I mean, why aren't we locally being consulted first? Why wasn't a local company in Mackay asked first? Or, you know, these it shouldn't be secondhand. It should be direct from the source, coming to our group or the community as a whole with our community meetings, with these information sessions that they literally give us a week's notice for, and they should be transparent with all that information.
I think in the Townsville Bulletin today, there was a half-page advert for expressions of interest for geological services and all the rest of it for the pumped hydro. So that that's how sort of quick they're getting this thing moving. But the other thing is, problem we have too is a lot of this push comes from the 3.5 million people in southeast Queensland, and when they hear about groups like yours, the group in Cairns, or about Chumbum, or their action is probably, oh, it's the same old story, not in my backyard sort of complaints, and just brush it off. And because it will never affect them, but they're the ones who want to appear holier than thou in regards to being in favour of this energy transition, but never wearing any of the consequences, except for one thing: they will eventually pay the price out of their hip pocket for basically the power costs continually going up. Because regardless of what people say, it may be cheap to buy turbines and things like that and produce power, but they're a big cost project. Like I say, just one wind farm, Cooper's Gas was $850 million, and like I say, you need 40 or 50 of them or more to replace places like Stanwell and all those things. And let's face it, coal-fired power stations have got next to no ecological impact. I mean, the Stanwell power station, I think it produces 1.4 gigawatts, but it sits on about 2 square kilometres. Yes, the coal mines get dug up to furnish it, provide fuel for it, and also the rest of the world. But overall, those facilities don't really overly cause a problem for the environment or people.
Well, and they could also look at perhaps using old mines for pumped hydro. There's a big hole in the ground that they need to fill in. Potentially they could get that ready to put water in and have the depth to pump hydro up and down. There's lots of things. Again, I don't want to go in. I personally don't want to discuss the rights or wrongs of coal energy, being that I don't know all the statistics myself. And I run the risk of getting a lot of hate mail about that. One of the reoccurring statements I get from people is making the sacrifice for the greater good. And I think that is a really detached, sociopathic way of seeing this. It's not just about a few people making the sacrifice for the greater good, but irreversibly changing pristine natural habitats in many areas, not just this one. So really driving home that impact, get out of the city, go for a drive, come to where we are, look around, visit some of these properties, and then tell us that we should be taking, one for the team.
Yeah, well, that was my point in regards to the 3.5 people in the southeast Queensland. Basically, it doesn't affect them, and and they sort of see, well, you have to take one for the team, sort of thing, and it's not really fair, especially when they don't even take the time to understand what is being lost. And as you were saying, in regards to, it's interesting that they're pushing for such a huge project when we've got things like, and we've already got models, we've got the Kidston pumped hydro system, which is, again, an old mining facility. I think it wasn't coal, I think it was some other minerals, it might have been gold or something like that. I think it was Kidston mine. But they're incorporating wind, solar, and a pumped hydro system there. And like you say, there's other opportunities in smaller scales that are probably less of an impact, and still, if you combine them, they will produce the same benefit. rather than this one-off massive, like this is basically unheard of, a $12 billion dam in Queensland.
You also run the risk if you have one battery, if that battery fails, it impacts a far greater area. There's research to say that if you say, for instance, create power generated in suburbs with batteries within those suburbs, and there's smaller pockets sustaining themselves, then you've got small areas that if that goes down, it's not large scale cities and whole states that's going to be impacted. That's also a more sustainable way that we can help our own communities. It's like they've got this huge push in Queensland for subsidies for solar on people's roofs. What if they were doing that and tying all of those suburbs with solar into their own battery systems and storage systems within that one suburb? Instead of one great big battery, we'll just have our own small lithium batteries that can help yourself and your neighbours. I mean, these are all options that they're actually researching in other countries, and it's there, the information's there, but instead Australia and the Queensland state are investing into old technologies that aren't actually, designed for hot climates the way that, we have in Queensland. Potentially hydro works in areas with great masses of water and peaking out with vast distances like that. I mean, yes, we've got 700 meters, they say, between Netherdale and Mount Dalrymple, but there were 3,000 other sites that they investigated in Australia. Potentially, some of those other sites might be suitable. We haven't been given that study. We haven't been given the details. There's been no transparency as to why they chose Youngalla. And that's the information that we want.
Well, we can only hope that you actually get a fair hearing. But from the track record of the state government on other issues, so much seems to be, once something's decided in Brisbane, it's a fait accompli. And they may go through all the processes and tick all the boxes and that, but not one thing changes from their vision of what they want, sort of thing. So,
well, our little motto that we're saying is just say no.
Yeah. In regards to local meetings, are there any sort of plan in the near future? And do you also have like a notable person to back you or front up sometime in the future on this topic?
So we have our next community meeting on the 8th of December in Finch Hatton. We're trying to achieve monthly meetings for the whole community to keep everyone updated with our progress and to give everyone the opportunity to partake in volunteering and helping the cause. Elaborate on notable person to back us up. Do you mean in regards to political or?
No, just someone of note, sort of thing. Maybe find a charismatic figure that sort of, can capture people's imagination. I mean, that sometimes, gives you the pulling power or push power to get your message across.
At this point, no, we haven't really had anyone super charismatic step forward. Initially, when we first heard about it, it was a small group of us that got together to speak with 7 News. And at that very first meeting, we formulated the beginning of community meetings, which led to a small number of us being elected for a committee. I myself am the interim president at the moment. Doug Cannon's the vice president, and so on and so forth. There's other members. We now have started a group where we have over 50 members, and this isn't just in our own local community, but we take membership from all over Queensland. And there's an emailing list where we keep people informed of what we're doing. And I'm currently running the Facebook page, No Pumped Hydro, Save Netherdale, Youngalla and Mount Dalrymple. So our official group is called No Pumped Hydro Pioneer Valley. to try and incorporate all of the areas directly and indirectly affected. However, as a group, even though we are anti-pump hydro in our name, we also are supportive of everyone's individual decisions. We're not taking a stance of peer pressuring or in any way being judgmental of everyone's individual positions and how they need to support their family.
As well as the sort of community meetings, do you think you'll take on a regular basis, maybe some of your meetings into Mackay itself and invite people along there?
Yeah.
On a sort of regular basis, so that meeting base can grow fairly quickly, like maybe one meeting in your area and then one meeting in Mackay.
Yes, this is definitely something we're working towards. We have a lot of people reaching out from Mackay who want to get on board. And it's about, I guess, taking that first step. We were definitely on the back foot when we found out, and it's been a bit of a scramble to get sort of our heads around everything going on. And for all of us, we had to actually do our own research in a very short period of time. Not many of us had ever heard about pumped hydro before it was announced it was going to be on top of us. So, you know, if we sort of need to be patient with ourselves to stop burnout happening, because, you know, it is a very busy time of year. There's a lot of pressure on people anyway, and we are trying to keep this ball rolling. We don't want people to lose sight of this and forget about it. So yes, after that next meeting in the beginning of December, we'll announce a meeting in Mackay for that greater area. But we also encourage the Mackay residents to come out to Finch Hatton, which will also, you know, help them get a sense of the area and the people that are directly affected.
I suppose the other thing is the people in Mackay need to get a bit of a grip on what it means to them in regards to the downstream impact of the project as well, because you can't have a project on that sort of scale and not have a downstream effect. And I suppose it's in their best interest to ask all the questions for themselves in regards to their future that's maybe changed by this project.
Yes, exactly. And both Burdekin and the Cattle Creek are catchments that flow into reef catchment areas. So, you know, the numbers on paper say 20% from the Cattle Creek catchment of water. But, you know, as we all know, the slightest change in temperature or the slightest change in anything will drastically have an impact on ecosystems. And, you know, the Mackay River that flows into the ocean, like many of these, have that freshwater transition into salt water. And taking water from that will have an impact. Whether, you know, you want to acknowledge it or not, on a 20%, you know, scale doesn't seem like much, but it will have an impact.
Okay, then we've gone over the hour. I'd just like to give you the opportunity to make any appeal that you like to the people out there and listening to this episode in regards to how they can help you and your communities going forward.
We are in the process of getting our flyers printed and gathering all of our information we want to share with people. We're definitely taking on board anyone who wants to do letterbox drops. That is state and countrywide. So anyone, anywhere who wants to do letterbox drops for information, we will post to you, and getting on board with sharing that information and creating a discussion is really important. Let's discuss this topic and get to the bottom of it.
Would you be looking as you go along? I mean, you've got a Facebook page. Would you be looking at also to establish a web page so people can log on and register their support and things like that? I know it's a bit of an impost in costs and running a website, but they do have their place in regards to helping collect that permanent record of people a little bit better than Facebook.
Yes, we will look into that. We've just finalised our bank account for donations. Our next community meeting will be officially our first AGM where we are taking nominations for positions. That will be for the next year. And once we have our treasurer and president and everyone in place, we can start really finalising, having that website, taking donations, sharing information, and getting everyone involved as best we can.
I think the website with a collage of the scenery that's going to be lost would have a great impact on people. Yes,
definitely. One of the best things that has had an impact so far was a small video that was sent in of a platypus on the other side of Finch Hatton, so further towards Pinnacle Mackay direction. So one of the misleading things is that there's only platypus at Yungala, but in actual fact, they travel right the way down. That went, you know, I would consider a small scale viral, and that's the sort of stuff that, you know, I love people sending in that I can share on our social media platform.
Okay, Leila, thanks very much for your time tonight. It's been greatly appreciated. If you could just stay on the line for a few minutes, I'll just introduce the next show and we'll have a quick chat.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much for coming, it's appreciated. If you have enjoyed tonight's show, please like, share and subscribe to our Facebook page. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, I'll have Sonia Johnston on from the Regional Australia Development, Tropical North. Now, they're involved in getting projects off the ground in far north Queensland, and two of the projects they're quite interested in at the moment and pushing is the Lakelands irrigation project, which involves putting a small dam on the Palmer River, and also over in the Flinders Shire. So please join me next week for that show. Thanks very much.